Call. Ready to go? Good afternoon. I call the meeting to order for the January 12th study session. Madam Clerk?
I will be doing roll call by, gosh, the volume is. I'll be doing roll call orally since Councilmember Brenner is on Zoom. Councilmember Brenner? I'll get back to that. Councilmember O'Neill?
Here.
Councilmember Dixon?
Here.
Councilmember Blom?
Here.
Councilmember Duffield? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Muldoon? Here. Mayor Avery?
Here.
And Councilmember Brenner?
Yes, here.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to current business, clarification of items on the consent calendar. Any questions on consent calendar? Councilmember Brenner?
No.
Councilmember O'Neill?
Yeah, I would note real quick on item number 9, the annual mayoral appointments. We have the intercity liaison committee. I think I've sat on that for 3 years. I have no idea what it does. So I'm just so everyone knows, when we make the motion today, I'm going to ask that that be disbanded. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Dixon?
Yeah, that reminds me of a question that I meant to clarify, and I didn't. On Southern California Association of Governments, so it has Mayor Pro Tem Muldoon and Councilmember Brenner. In what capacity? Because I've just been named to the Regional Council of SCAG, and I have been currently serving as a member of the Transportation Policy Committee. And so what do we need to do about that?
The mayor can amend his appointment to appoint you as the member and then another council member as the alternate, if he so chooses.
Because I think I have to name an alternate or recommend an alternate from District 2.
Oh, from the other district. Okay.
I mean,
okay.
to include
So,
Newport Beach or beyond Newport Beach, but those
Okay.
cities that are part of District 2.
okay, but you would be the member of the SCAG appointment?
Yes.
Okay. Then when we do the motion, then that should be included in the motion to have you as the member of SCAG. And then once you make your appointment, let me know, and I will also include that in the roster.
All right, thank you. Otherwise, no changes.
Thank you. Councilmember Blom?
No changes.
Councilmember Duffield? Mayor Pro Tem Muldoon?
Thank you. Does that mean the request is to remove me from the position? Okay, so the request from Councilwoman Dixon is to remove me from the position. I would like to have the committee that Will wants to abolish then, so I have something to brag about. Yeah, I'm fine with that. You've been very involved with that issue. Thank you.
Okay, and I have no need for clarification. Thank you. Moving on to item 2, SS2, marine activities permits. Council receive an update on the Harbor Commission's work on Harbor Code Title 17, marine activities permit, also known as a MAP, and recommended revisions to the code. MAPs are required for businesses who operate some portion of their business on the water.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I need to recuse myself for business interests on this item. Thank you.
So does anyone have a conflict anyone further have a conflict they would like to announce? Seeing this regarding this item, just Mr. Duffield recusing, so we can hear from staff.
Mr. Mayor, that'll be me tonight.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. Carol Jacobs, your Assistant City Manager, also liaison to the Harbor Commission. Harbor Master Borshing is on vacation this week, and so you get to hear me tonight, so I appreciate that. This has been a long time in the making, and I'm pleased to present to you the work of the Harbor Commission on the proposed revisions to the marine activities permit. As we all know, Newport Harbor has over 800 acres of shared uses. We have people that live, work, and play on the harbor, and keeping all those needs balanced is one of the reasons we have the Harbor Department and one of its goals. Here are just a few of the people and groups that use our harbor, and there are many others. As we'll hear later with the Harbor Commission objectives, there are millions of people that enjoy this harbor every year, and we're trying to balance out the needs of all these folks. So what is a marine activities permit? We've had marine activities permits since the 1970s. It is a way to manage the harbor and its growth to minimize its impact on the harbor businesses and on the residential communities that surround the harbor. In reviewing of the history of MAPs that were back in the 1970s, many of those issues still exist today. This includes parking impacts, noise, and trash. Today's proposal hopes to strengthen our processes to continue to address these issues. When the Harbor Commission was tasked with the review of Title 17, they made a very specific decision to exclude the MAP program and handle it after the work of the rest of Title 17. And that's why we're back here with you this afternoon. Most of Title 17 was approved by this body back in February and November of 2020. This gave the subcommittee time to work with the business community and our legal department to make sure we address the needs of the business community and the city. The subcommittee held 3 community meetings with businesses on the harbor, and those discussions helped frame the proposal that you see before you this evening. So these are the areas that we really focus our recommendations on tonight. We took a look at the entire code. We also looked at our experience over the last 3 years of actually having a harbor department and trying to manage these businesses on the harbor. And so these are the major changes that we're going to be addressing with the map this evening. What activities would require a marine activities permit? So currently, passengers carrying charter operators, rental businesses, and human-powered craft rental business, stand-up paddleboards, etc. However, what has been excluded historically out of the MAP process is a 6-pack or a 12-pack charter. And what that is, for those of you who are not boaters, I've learned this recently, is a 6-pack is a small boat that's rented that can be driven by the boat owner, but they're not required to have a MAP. So you can plop your boat out anywhere and pick up people and get paid for it. And that is the same thing with a 12-pack charter. There's single vessel charter operators that do not require a marine activity permit. They would require a business license, but they don't require a marine activity permit. And also what we found is that people who are providing services to the boating community inside the harbor, particularly those folks that are servicing our mooring fields, don't have a marine activities permit as well. And so these proposed changes would help close some of those gaps. So many of the reasons for the MAP is to kind of create this good neighbor kind of feeling in the harbor. It's a big harbor, there's lots of users, and we want everybody to be able to enjoy the harbor to its fullest. And so if you look at the 3 green highlighted bullet points up there, those are the 3 things that we are proposing to change and add to the code for the existing MAP holders. I need to make a minor correction to the staff report. As of January 1st, 2021, the fees changed for the maps. The map fee is $350, not $395, and the renewal fee is now $282 and not $197. And that's based on our historical. Now we have some actually really good data about how long it takes us to do a map from a staff level, and also the violations that are planning to go up. The second violation will go from 200 to 2,000. So those are big increases, but our experience has been that when we are trying to get people to comply, the $100, the $50, the $500 is not enough to grab somebody's attention and get them to to comply. The other thing I want the council to really understand is, I'm not sure we've issued a citation for almost anything. We've issued administrative citations, but this is a last resort after the business has really said that they're not going to comply with us. And that's why we're recommending these kind of steep fees. So we have two groups of people that will be under these maps. We have people that are currently required to have a marine activities permit. And then we have this new group that today doesn't have to have a map, but they will have to have a map if this goes into effect and council adopts this new change. And what we want to do here is we're going to be required to, let me start that over. So we have to make accommodations for the existing businesses that are currently legal. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to add some additional conditions to them, which will allow us to know who they are, know how many boats they have, know where they're located, but they won't have to meet those parking requirements. And the parking requirements, we believe, at staff level, is the thing that will really put a business under. If we've got multiple businesses working out of a commercial marina, those boats cannot meet our parking requirements. Those parking requirements are established through the code and have to go through the planning department. So what we're saying to the business is, look, you can exist the way you are now, exactly the way you are now. You're just going to have to tell us who you are, what kind of vessels you have, where you operate from, and give us some insurance. And you can go about your day. But if we have a problem with you, or if you change your business, not if you have a problem with you, if you change your business, if you add a boat, if you make a bigger boat, then you would be required to have a map. And we believe over time that this will reduce just naturally the number of people that do not have a map. This grandfathering will go away after time. Very much like the sign program that we have talked about in the past. 15 years ago, there were all these non-conforming signs. Now there's very few. And we believe that this will happen with the maps as well. The other thing that will stop is any new businesses coming in. If you're a new business coming into the harbor, you'll be required to have a map. So if you're a little six-pack and you want to be in the harbor, you'll have to have a marine activities permit.
May I ask a question? Yeah. Okay, just following up on your statement. So a new business comes in and they would previously have been exempt from parking, but now they will. So all new businesses coming in would have to have a parking accommodation?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
at least we don't make the parking any worse than it is
Right.
now, right?
Okay, all right. What about those exempted from the parking requirement because they've been doing business and the continued impacts on the neighborhoods?
That is going to continue unless they change their business or go out of business.
Is there anything we can do to impose the parking requirement over time and make it conditional on some aspect that, there's Uber and Lyft, so it doesn't keep them from operating. Please put a notice on your website that your customers must come from by taxi, Uber or Lyft, we're ignoring the impacts on the local neighborhood, and I'm concerned about that.
We did not address the parking issue. We kind of pulled it off the table because we did not feel like there was a way we could address it without now going back and looking at the parking requirements as a whole, because unless Aaron wants to correct me, we would have to go back and change our parking requirements as a whole, because right now a person comes in and they have to meet our parking requirements per the municipal code. We don't have an alternative that at this point. If that's something the council's interested in, obviously we could take a look
Right,
at
but
that.
as we know on tonight's agenda, we're going to probably be considering adjusting our parking requirements for restaurants and other hospitality services and launching a review of that. So because the reality is many people are coming to this city in normal economic times, coming to the city through Uber and Lyft and other means. So there has been perhaps a reduction in the demand for parking. So it seems to me if we're going to be looking at the parking codes anyway and giving a relaxation, considering a relaxation for certain types of businesses, why wouldn't we consider this as well?
I think that would be an appropriate place to.
It's a hospitality
To
serving
consider that
business.
when you're, this would be part of your whole picture as you review those parking requirements.
All right, so maybe I'll amend that for consideration later on this evening. Okay, thank you.
Mr. O'Neill.
Yeah, that segues into one of my concerns as well, which is, so a concern I have is approaching this on a holistic way instead of kind of trying to figure out from a business to business kind of approach. And so, for example, if you're, it's a significantly different, it's a significantly different analysis if we have, a charter boat operation versus a stand-up paddleboard operation. So let's say you've got a stand-up paddleboard operation launching at a Newport Aquatic Center or something. If you've got 10 stand-up paddleboards, it's a strange, to me, it's a little strange to try to do, a marine activities permit that is kind of a one-size-fits-all approach when we've got so many different types of businesses that are already existing, let alone contemplated into the future. And one of the things that I've been trying to struggle with, because even talking about this raises the risk that we would have to do almost like a sector approach. Like instead of one marine activities permit, you'd have to do almost like a sector analysis for each business that comes in. Because, for example, and this is another concern I have, one of the concerns that I have is the requirement for insurance. I understand the requirement. I understand needing insurance, but every business is going to require different levels of insurance. And right now, under the code, we're delegating the size and scope of the insurance to our own internal. It's not called a risk manager. And when we were looking at the waste haulers, we were willing to do that because we were willing to increase that because we knew that waste haulers, just the way that they were handling it, it's inherently dangerous to other people. If we start, what I'm concerned about is if we just delegate the insurance requirements, and frankly, some of the map requirements that would apply very differently to different sectors. I'm concerned that we'll start either pricing people out or have a whole bunch of one-offs come up that cause a lot of heartache and grief. And I'm wondering if one of the approaches to take here is to do kind of a sector analysis, because this isn't like a one-size-fits-all, like a business license. This is more of an approach where we really should be treating charter boat operators very differently. To Councilmember Dixon's point, actually, about the parking, I mean, that's a significantly different parking analysis than if we had, like I said, the stand-up paddle boards or just a one-off boat rental. And so I recognize that's difficult, but that's been a concern of mine, and and it's study session, so I figured I might as well raise it and see how that's been analyzed and discussed.
Councilmember O'Neill, if I may. So that issue was, Chair Kenny is here. He can attest that we spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours talking about this. And so what we have developed is four kinds of maps, if you will. One is for charter boats, one is for human-powered vessels, one is for electric, fuel vessel. There's one more, Chair Kenny, if you can help me. Which is there's the fourth, wind. So every, and as we go through a new map, if you will, every business has to come in and they have to go through a process, just like you would in planning. And we identify where they're located, who they're what commercial dock are they going to be off of? Do they think they can go off of a public beach? And you're right. So we would not have the same parking requirements for a charter company as we would a one-person six-pack boat. But But that process, every person goes through that process, and their parking is assigned to them specifically to meet the needs of their individual business. So I believe we have addressed that to a large extent. And the other issue about insurance, I had a conversation yesterday with the risk manager and the city attorney and talking about insurance and limits of insurance and how much this is going to cost people. And our first comment is, I would hope that if you are running a boat and taking the public on the water, that you would have insurance. So really all we're asking for is naming us additional insured. And I want to liken it to a recreation class. You know, somebody's providing us with a recreation class and they're charging, you know, $50 a person to do a drawing class. They still have to have $1 million worth of insurance in naming the city additionally insured. And inherently, there's a lot more dangerous activity going on the water than a drawing class. And so I think we've been very specific across the board about what kinds of insurances we want with anybody who's interacting with us. And those folks on the water, since it's city tidelands, you know, we just want to make sure that we're protected from an accident happening with, at least we could be an additional insured versus having no insurance at all.
Yeah, so I guess two responses to that. One of them is, well, three actually. One of them is maybe we should be looking at the insurance requirements for drawing classes. That's perhaps the first. The second is on the insurance side, that there's a significant difference between having the code require us to be an additional insured and also require our risk manager to set the standard for them in terms of the amount of insurance that they would have. I'm not sure how to deal with that. I'm gonna have to think on that one. And then the third one is, so you've created four different maps. Have we seen them? Or is that
The
part of-
Harbor Commission approved them. You all have not seen them.
So I guess I will say a concern of mine is approving a Title 17 change without seeing, so I apologize. I'm looking at, Aaron, you're gonna have to help me on this one. So when I'm looking through Title 17, where in Title 17 would I find the language that would change it so that we would be authorizing multiple different versions of marine activities permits?
So I think the way they've set this up is you'd have your standard conditions apply to everybody who's getting a map. And then what they do is they apply individual conditions depending on, you know, which type of business you're operating.
Could we, I just like to, did that language already exist in Title 17, or are we approving language that now allows for individual conditions?
So under 171060, it basically provides that any additional conditions they think are appropriate can be imposed. And so my understanding is you're basically breaking it down to 4 different groups and imposing different conditions based on, what the business is actually doing. And then they came up with a group of standard conditions that apply to everybody. And that'd be under 1710-060A, allows for the imposition of additional conditions.
Okay, I'll take a look at it.
Dixon?
Can I follow up on the insurance question? So is this on section 1710-070? Is this the only provision that's new is including the city as the additional insured? Would that impose additional risk requirements on the business? Is it going to change their insurance requirements or the city's imposed requirements?
So naming the city as an additional insured could result in some cost to the business owner to get that endorsement. But typically, the cost wouldn't be very significant. Insurance companies don't really like to add people as additional insurers, but my understanding is the cost isn't overly significant for adding that endorsement.
Okay, because I did hear from a business owner on the specific questions. I'll just read. They're concerned that the requirements of the city's risk manager could come up with might not necessarily meet up with what the market offers for their type of business.
I think that's going to the level of insurance as opposed to the.
And we're not
question about-
the city's not going to get to that degree.
Well, I think that, the way it's written now, the risk manager would be setting the level of insurance, but I think that that's what that question's going to. Is it, $300,000, is it $1 million? Not so much the naming the city as an additional insured. I think that was the point of the question that you just read.
Okay, well, I just want to clarify. So by allowing this additional change, giving the city to be named as an additional insured, would there be new requirements imposed on the business entity?
Yes, that would be new. It's
So
not
that's,
currently in the code.
all right, so have we specified what that could be to the businesses? I mean, the impacts on the business?
Well, there probably definitely some administrative costs because they're going to have to work with their insurance carrier to basically name the city as an additional insured.
Sure.
And there could be some financial costs for adding that endorsement. My understanding is that there isn't a significant financial cost for adding that endorsement.
But no additional, the city's not imposing, other than what you just said, any additional requirements? You could be amount or level of insurance, you're saying the city could impose that?
Well, it's always been, so currently in the code, it allows this, the risk manager to set the limits and
Oh,
coverage
that's already
required.
there. Okay, okay, all right, thank you.
So all the boats operating on the harbor, certainly, probably not all of them, but anyone that's concerned about their financial well-being, and they're carrying passengers for hire, a 6-pack, 12-pack, or what they call a certified vessel, U.S. Coast Guard certified vessel, like the Hornblower fleet and the Electra Charters fleet. They all have insurance, and maybe some very low end don't. And then the cost, so they're paying a policy for carrying passengers for hire, and that includes Jones Act coverage for their employees, and it's pretty robust. And to add someone as additional insured, my experience, because I've been in that business, is there's no cost to do that. It's just part of that's one of the benefits of your policy. They just add it. And so they would obviously be adding the marina they're operating out of. The marina would want that before they would rent slips to them. All marinas require that insurance because one of the most dangerous parts of boating is simply getting on and off. And I think the slip and fall between boat and docks, that's where you get most of it.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, let me, if I could raise just 2 quick points. So over the last, 6, 7 years, we probably had, 1 case per year that resulted from somebody slipping and falling while boarding a vessel. And most of those we do tender over to whoever the operator was in their insurance company, and they defend the city. I am going to make one correction. I just want to make sure I was clear with Councilmember Dixon as far as her point. Currently, the insurance requirements are imposed on people operating with a permit. Under the new provisions, it would be imposed on anybody operating in the harbor. So I didn't want you to think that I misled you on that. So it does make it broader, but I do tend to agree with Brad's point that most people likely have insurance somewhere near the levels that would be required.
Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you. I have a question about this slide, but how many more slides are in the presentation? I don't want to take up too much of your time. 3? Why don't you finish and then I'll ask. I'll come back
Okay.
to this slide and ask the other ones. Thanks. Oh, that's no. I'm sorry. No.
No, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Quick, I just wanted to circle back to the insurance thing because really my concern on the insurance isn't the additional insured. I think any business is happy to carry insurance. It's the extra regulatory wording in there requiring the risk assessor or the risk analyst because that comes with $0 accountability. And so that means one person gets to decide on essentially how much risk a paddleboard operator has, a 6-pack, or 6 vessels. And I think that puts us in kind of a big gray area. And I don't like that gray area when it comes to just one person making a decision. I like insurance. I mean, we all do, especially in business. Additional insured, I think it's great. The real question is, do we just give a lot of power to somebody to really up the cost of what it takes to operate within the marina? Thanks.
So I do think that you are giving, the way it's written currently, you are giving the risk manager the authority to do that. Based on my discussions and Carol's discussions with the risk manager, her intent is to basically set them in line with other cities, such as Long Beach and maybe like Avalon. She checked with them, and the levels she was going to impose are basically similar to what are being required in other jurisdictions. So I think she does do due diligence, if that gives you any comfort about what are other people charging for the insurance, as opposed to kind of just pulling a number out of a hat. But I do understand the concern of giving one person the authority to do that.
Language in there to limit to market prices or some guardrails just to protect based on comparable market conditions in other harbor jurisdictions or something?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways to approach it. You could actually put the exact dollar amounts in here and then have it come back to council if you want to modify those amounts, or you could put some type of language like you're discussing that's kind of in line with industry standards type of language.
Yeah. Even something with like right to appeal. I think right now it's pretty absolute. The language, if I remember it correctly, says this is final without appeal. I just think there needs to be some secondary on this.
Mr. O'Neill.
Yeah, actually, that was my third concern that I hadn't raised yet. I was going to wait until the end, but I have proposed language that would modify that paragraph to, yeah, I know. This is the lawyer. I have proposed language that we're going to have discussed probably at the meeting tonight on that exact issue, because I don't like the lack of appeal as well. So the recommendation that I'm going to propose, or the proposal at least, is to allow for the harbor master, it to be reviewed by the harbor master, and when we did a Title 17 update, decisions by the harbor master are appealable to the harbor commission. So anyway, I agree with that sentiment, but just wanted to point that out.
Hey. Yeah.
So just wanted to, as a follow-up, so all of our existing businesses, and this is the first time that we've done this, in prior versions of Title 1710, existing grandfathered businesses just existed under the old rules, and there was no additional kind of accountability or safety measures or, trash measures or anything we could really kind of wrap our hands around if we had a bad operator in the harbor. So if you are an existing business, you'll be grandfathered in, and every other requirement except parking will apply to you. You just won't have a formal map. But this will give us an opportunity to check in with you once a year, see if your business has changed, see where your location is, make sure you have insurance, whatever that may be at this point, that you have trash receptacles, and that you're managing your sanitation and of your boats properly, so that we're not getting water quality issues. That you're not. This one came out of our community meetings. Very bright lights. Some of these boats, when they go out first thing in the morning, they have these giant bright floodlights, and they bother the residents. And so, keeping those lights off or minimizing those or pointing them, in a different direction so they're not bothering our residents. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to do as from a good neighbor perspective. So if you are existing business, these will be the additional requirements that you'll have to continue to operate in the harbor. One of the things that we don't know is what we don't know. And it's really difficult right now for us to gauge how many of these folks we have. But we've done some internet searches for, having fun in Newport Harbor, and you get lists and lists of people offering services. And so that's how we will initially make contact with these folks. Education first, lots of education, lots of cajoling, lots of, try to get us on board, try to make sure that we are working with them. We have no interest in, killing anybody's business. That's not what this is about. But we do want them to be a good neighbor and to follow the rules that everyone needs to follow. One of the other things that we've learned as we had those community meetings was people who are existing map holders are are pretty irritated with everybody who doesn't have to follow the rules, with all the exemptions. It's not fair. It's not a fair playing field for everybody. And we hope over time that this will put everybody on the same equal playing field. For example, you have one paddleboarder who on Saturday morning, takes 15 paddleboards out of the back of his truck and he puts it on a public dock, and that's where he rents from. He doesn't have a map. He doesn't have anything. He's operating illegally. We have to catch him. And somebody else who has a brick and mortar store that, is following all the rules and has all the parking and all of that. So we just want to make it fair and equitable for everybody.
Nixon.
To that point, back, if you'd go to the previous slide. No passenger loading from public docks. What is the dunes? Is that a public dock or launch ramp?
That's county.
County.
That's county property.
So I'm hearing this from some operators that do have a map, but do have a business license, operate, and they have brick and mortar in Newport Beach, but some of these non-mapped vessels are launching from the dunes, and you just said it's a county property, so what can we do about that?
Well, if they stroll into Newport Harbor and we catch them,
Well, how would we? How would we know?
well, because our code enforcement officers, thank you for the additional staff, are going to be out on the weekends, patrolling and understanding who's operating out there, who's showing up on the weekends. We're going to be talking with everybody. And if you are launching from the dunes and you're doing business in the city of Newport Beach, yes, we will require you to have a map.
I still don't know how they'd be caught. How would, is there a little decal or something that they?
We haven't quite figured that out yet, but we'll have a list of all the businesses that we know of, right? And that's what our Harbor Patrol does, is they, friendly go up and chat with people and, is this your boat? Where'd you get it? Are you renting it? Where'd you rent it from? Oh, thank you. Have a nice day.
Okay.
And that's how there's a little bit of sleuthing involved, but that's typically how we go about it.
Okay, one other question that you don't mention in terms of a vessel. I've seen a couple of these hydrofoil surfboards on our harbor. Are they being rented? Are they permitted? Do they need a marine activities permit? I don't know.
They will need a marine activities permit.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Those hydrofoil boards are certainly not rented. There's only a few of them, and they're very expensive. So, to my knowledge, they're not rented. But back to Ms. Dixon's concerns. For years, we really haven't had a harbor department, right? The county's done it, and they patrol the harbor, and they've done a good job. But their principal interest is law and order and protection of property and certainly lives, and they've done wonderful things protecting people. But they have not really done any code enforcement. And they haven't been involved with the harbor to the extent of, you go to Avalon, and it's a little different, but a harbor master and his staff, they get to know all the players on the harbor. And it's not that difficult because there's just very discrete zones where commercial operators are happening. And they are familiar with it enough, and they're on the water enough to where they see someone new, or they see something that's not right in terms of the vessel operating. And so they're just very connected in the community. They know the sort of the influencers on the harbor, the people with the businesses that are, good operators, and they're paying attention, and then they build trust, and people talk to them. And so that's the way we have to do it. And that's the only way we can do that, is have our folks on the harbor with a keen interest in managing the harbor in that way. So, and it's not about gotcha as it is just sort of talking to people, and when someone's playing music too loud on their charter boat and disturbing residents, it's a conversation. And 90% of the time that conversation is going to go well, and it's going to be settled, and maybe they remind them again 6 months later. But you've got to have that relationship, and we've never really had that on the harbor until now. It's starting, and so that's really where it's at. But it's about time on the water and people really getting to know the businesses and the community members and our 1,200 residents on the harbor as well. because that's the way they learn most things, is from the people that are operating the businesses when they see things that are not correct, or the residents. And we know that from our mooring people that are liveaboards. They're very helpful. They see things, and that's like any law enforcement community. They need the community's input. So we just haven't had that, and we're starting that well, it has been running for a couple of years now, but we need it to be more robust going forward, because there's a lot going on in Newport Harbor. Thank you.
I think this is, nope, one more after this one. Nope, this is it. So this is what we are asking for the council to do this evening. In the regular session would be to consider our ordinance amending Title 1710. And if you amend that, then we will incorporate all of the rules and regulations we've established. We'll work with our exempt non-conforming businesses, and we will issue those 4 types of permits that we have talked about. I think too, this is really a living document. You know, our harbor department is still very, very young. We're toddlers at this point. We're 3. We still have a lot to learn. Every day I have a conversation with Kurt. There's something new that we've never seen before that we have to address, and this is going to be a learning process. And I would expect that at some point we're going to come back to the council and say, you know what, this isn't quite working the way we anticipated. Can we change it? Can we move this? Those kinds of things. So we do think it's a living document. We think we need to be flexible. We're gentle code enforcement. We want to make sure that we have good relationships with all of our business community so that everyone can enjoy the harbor. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you might have.
Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you, Carol. Can we go back a couple slides to
Sure.
the new versus
That one or the one before?
one more? Yeah, new versus existing non-conforming.
Okay.
On the last bullet point, it says, or existing businesses operating which are determined as not being exempt from the provision. So who would make that determination?
Businesses or existing. So we have currently about 20 to 30 businesses that should have a map today, and they don't.
I understand.
So we're chasing them down to try and get them to have maps. As we go through this, we want to make sure that you're an existing business, right? So if you're a new business, you're going to have a map.
Agreed.
I think where we're a little concerned is if you adopt this tonight and people find out that pretty soon you're going to have to get a full map and get the parking requirements, and a bunch of people, decide they want to put their boat for hire, and they say, well, look, I have a business and it was in place before then. We want to work with people to make sure that they're not kind of trying to fool us. That they've had a business license if you got a business license for a year, great. You're a grandfathered business. If you got your business license for the first time in January of 2021, we're going to be a little more suspect, but under this rule, we got to let you in. And so we will let you in, and you won't have to have that full map requirement. Is that what you were asking?
Well, in those scenarios, I would want us to define them tonight so that they're defined. My concern is that the question is essentially, who determines them as not being exempt from this provision? Which staff member?
It would ultimately it would go from code enforcement to the harbor master, and then that decision would be appealable to the harbor commission.
So the same chain of command exists for that as well.
Yes.
But we have the ability to define that essentially as January 1 or January
Whatever day it's going to be.
15th
Yes.
or whenever it's
Yeah.
in effect, 2021.
Mhm.
I personally would want to define that. I'd rather have a couple people sneak through and get away with it than us come down on businesses in an arbitrary fashion.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So if you are in business prior to the full adoption of this ordinance, would be 30 days after your second reading, you're in.
Yeah.
And we would not take that away from somebody.
Yeah, I would support something like that. Thank you. A couple questions. Is there specific parking? I know we mentioned parking. Are we gonna get specific on parking requests, parking requirements?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
So I know you mentioned the presentation, parking requirements. And a couple slides out, you have that part Xed out.
Right.
So is it your intent that that's not gonna be incorporated at all now?
The way that the proposed ordinance is written, if you are an existing business, not required to have a map, you would not have to have the parking requirement.
Okay. If you, going forward, what is the exact requirement? Just so I know what we're comparing.
It depends on the size of your business. So Simone, maybe you can help me out. It's like one parking space for every 3 people. I want to say that's... Sorry, Simone, to put you on the spot.
Correct. Simone Georges, Community Development Director. So it is different based on the different businesses. And while the council was talking, I was looking it up. So for example, sports fishing charter, it is 1 per 2 passenger. And for excursion services is 1 vehicle per 3 passengers and crew members.
All right, any of the other ones?
We don't have, we have uses on the land, but we don't have an extensive use. We do have water transportation service, which is just the office use, which is 1 per 100. So again, we don't have a lot of marine activity uses in our parking code.
So how would we determine how many spaces are required if they are gonna get a map?
If there's a new business coming into the city and they need a map, we'll ask them about the boat size, the vessel size, and how many they can support. So if it's 1 vessel with 6 passengers, then that would be 2 vehicles.
So you would make that determination
correct.
when they applied based on what categories they fit in and the intensity of the use?
We work with the harbor department on these
Okay.
maps.
Okay. And how about, final question, restrooms?
So we haven't made, question. Oh, we specifically. Well, let me get back to you on that one.
Okay,
I'll
it's okay if you need to
I'll-
stall, or if you want to flush it, it's up to you. But, all right. Well, you did great, appreciate it. That's all from me, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other council comments? No.
Yeah. So mine comes back to parking one more time. And Simone, real quick, sorry. Paddleboards, I don't know if did we get a number for what? Is there none? And this comes to a more specific idea.
It's really based on what we have in our code. And in our code, it states entertainment and excursion services, 1 vehicle per 3 passengers and crew. And I don't think paddleboard fits into that.
Okay.
We just don't have that broken down.
Okay. So then the question starts to beg, there's certain areas in our city we just don't have parking. And Balboa Island is one of those areas. So moving forward, this would essentially shut down any new operators on that island. Is that correct? Because they wouldn't have a parking requirement available.
They do have the option to have an off-street parking agreement. So if they can find parking somewhere else, yeah, I know.
I think the joke on Balboa Island
Yeah.
is you can't find parking. But
It probably will restrict it. You're correct.
And so I understand when it comes to the charters and people where we have more cars coming in, but there's something to be said for recreation services that add to the community. And if all of a sudden paddleboards and human-powered vessels are required to get a parking requirement, does that mean that in order to ride a paddleboard or, I know everything changes, they'll never be able to do them on Balboa Island once we get through the grandfathered businesses. And that's a concern, because I think that's quality of life issue. That's less about how much regulation can we put on. And, you know, I like controlling our harbor. I like everything we're talking about in this, but I want to look at the other side, which is part of the enjoyment of the city itself. And I don't know that these are our problem operators. I understand that there's issues on public beaches. Lido has it, but that's a residential neighborhood. You know, we have other ones that are hybrid commercial. And I think Balboa Village, even though I think we're looking at a new parking overlay or something over there, it puts it in that same context. And I just want to make sure that some of the areas we're trying to revitalize and add more life to and have those merchants survive, we're not hamstringing with a policy that shuts down operations moving forward and into the future. Do we have an answer for that or an idea?
Well,
a thought?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one of the things we talked about at the very beginning was, you know, you're proposing to look at your entire parking program, right? It's kind of citywide, and this is where that needs to come in, and we really need to be thoughtful about how we address parking with these kind of quality of life, fun activities that make people want to come to Newport Beach and give people a really great living here. And so, very sensitive to that. You know, one of the things I think we should be looking at as we move forward, if the council so chooses, is, you know, at what point, let's take Balboa Island for example, since you brought that up. At what point can we, how many people who are grandfathered go away before we can start adding new businesses? Or, you know, we're in a box on Balboa Island, right? So what is the maximum number of businesses we could have there? I think between Simone's staff and our staff and, you know, the commercial operators, we could kind of get a sense of what that island could bear from a fair use for everybody. And I think that's some analysis we could certainly do.
Okay. I look more into the idea that we have these 4 categories, and maybe human-powered vessels aren't one of our big map issues. I get the renting idea and the insurance coverage, liability. I know the love of liability, but I think that we talk about the 6-packs and the 12-packs as being the biggest issue in this. So instead of maybe tackling the entire thing as broad spectrum, we can look at the 3 categories that are the most important, you know, the offload and utility side of it, the 6-packs and 3-packs and the other larger operators, and, you know, maybe have an exemption or something a little longer, you know, maybe just a registration period for human-powered vessels. I don't know that those are the issue on our harbor currently.
Ms. Dixon.
We're not talking about the recreational user. We're talking about a commercial entity that is bringing their van with a half a dozen paddleboards and people are meeting them at.
And it's a business transaction going on, yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
All right. It raises a question. I mean, I've brought up the neighborhood impacts because I've heard about this for years. But it begs the question, these people coming in, are they actually benefiting our businesses on Marine Avenue in Balboa Island? They come in, they go on their paddleboard experience, and then they leave. I'm all for supporting business, but you know, I've seen these. I mean, we see the same thing on the peninsula where people, not paddleboards, but surfboards, and they're renting surfboards at the beach, and they're not licensed. They're not required to have a marine activity permit.
Right.
We're not talking about that. But there are these pop-up businesses that operate on our waters without it doesn't create a level playing field for the existing businesses, as you said in your opening comments, who are fulfilling the necessary requirements. So we want to encourage business. We want use on our harbor. But we do have standards that protect our residents and protect the other businesses, because these other businesses are meeting the city's requirements. Now, I agree we're going to be looking at those requirements, which I think is necessary, but I think it should be a level playing field. I mean, we must protect all businesses. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, so someone that, I mean, we do see these in the peak periods, the vans come in with the boards and they launch off, basically they're on street ends and on public beaches. And that's not allowed currently, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so, you know, where the other businesses, they've got investment, they're paying rent, they've got dock fees and all the rest of it. So, and the Balboa Island, I would think that, you know, obviously the paddle boards, Duffy Rentals, you've got an awful lot of people that come to the island that rent a house, and that's part of the enjoyment of the island is having access to all that. Particularly, I think, yeah, the human-powered craft, paddle boards, that kind of thing. So certainly not all of them are driving cars on the island to rent. Many of them are already there. Their cars are already there. Thank you. Full council comments? Okay, go out to the public.
Mayor Avery, members of the City Council, my name is Jim Mosher. First comment I wanted to make, I noticed in the lobby that there is something that claims to be a corrected version of the ordinance. I appreciate that somebody looked at my written comment that the red line that was in your agenda packet didn't match the clean version of the ordinance that was in there. However, I've since looked at it more carefully, and I believe the red line, that this version in the lobby reverts to the redlined version, which actually seems to have been an older version. So I think the clean one that you have in your staff report agenda packet is actually the one that you will be looking at tonight, rather than this one. The second comment I wanted to make is that if the City Council's objective is to enact laws that are clearly written so that the public understands how they work, as opposed to laws where the staff makes up the rules as they go along, I think this ordinance, and I appreciate a lot of work has gone into it, I think more work needs to go into it before it's ready. The fact that we would be enforcing parking requirements without yet knowing what those parking requirements are or having them specified in the code is clearly a warning flag. The fact that we've been told that there's 4 different kinds of maps, yet anybody reading the ordinance would have no idea that there are 4 different kinds of maps or what they are, is another warning flag. I wanted you to look at page 13-10 of the agenda packet. This is the clean version of the ordinance. Paragraph up to the top, section 1710.020, gives a very broad definition of what people need a map for. No person shall engage in any commercial activity on the waters of Newport Harbor without first obtaining a valid marine activity permit. I would like to point out to the council members that they're not aware of that some of the words that appear in our ordinances are defined elsewhere in the code. In particular, Title 17 has a lot of definitions at the beginning of it. Commercial is defined, and you may be surprised to know that a nonprofit yacht club is defined as a commercial activity. So apparently they need a marine activity permit, which I do not know if they have them currently. I cannot tell from reading the code whether they need one permit or they need a permit for every activity that they engage in. It's also not clear from reading the code who applies for a marine activity permit. And that may seem a technical question, but it's important because the code as currently written, if you were to adopt it tonight, does not allow anyone to get a marine activity permit if one under their name was ever revoked. So it's important to know, is it a business? Is it a person? Can somebody else apply for that in the future? How does this ban on people with an applicant with revoked permit work? So anyway, I think this needs quite a lot more work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any?
Good evening, and If I may, I'll remove that so you can understand me. Mayor Avery, members of the City Council, Bill Kenny representing the Harbor Commission. I'm here with Commissioner Don Yon, and we'll just make a couple of points that might help to clarify what's transpired to get us to this point and where we would hope that we can go. The Harbor Commission has just finished a harbor attendance study, which we hope to bring to you soon. We found that 7.1 million people visit our harbor every year. It's pretty incredible. To touch on a few of the questions and comments that have been raised, Councilmember O'Neill mentioned the need for a sector analysis. Prior to our review of Section 1710, there was one marine activities permit for every type of business that was operating in Newport Harbor. What we did was to define those businesses and break them up into 4 different sectors so that each would have special conditions depending on the type of operation that was run. Councilmember Dixon mentioned parking, and parking is a real double-edged sword. On the one hand, we want to provide adequate parking because we also have 1,200 residents that live on the bay. I don't know how many residents live on Balboa Island, but we have gotten significant input from the residents of Balboa Island who are complaining about commercial operations that are usurping the parking. Try Opal Street on any given day. There was a concern registered by staff that if the city council were to impose new restrictions on existing businesses, that could be tantamount to, to condemnation. And so what we were trying to do was to protect the existing businesses that are operating properly with business licenses and marine activities permits, especially those that didn't have to have them prior to the proposed changes. Know that all of the large commercial operators, the charter fleets, have had to have parking since inception. They all have what's called either on-site parking or they have off-site parking agreements, some with Hoag Hospital and the parking structure. Know that we had several public outreach meetings, and none of the existing businesses had any concerns at all about these proposed changes. In fact, they were in favor. For example, the paddleboard and kayak rental companies, they have to provide parking because of their business license. They're not opposed at all to these regulations. In fact, they're in support. They don't want the rogue operators who come down from wherever with 6 paddleboards on the roof of a car and try to rent them off of our beaches. With respect to
Mr. Kinney?
Yes, sir.
How much, we're a little short on time, so.
I'll wrap it up.
If you can.
I'll wrap
Great,
it up.
Thank you.
One comment about some sort of an operator that may launch at the dunes. If you're operating on in Newport Harbor, you're required to have a permit. One of the big concerns we have, and I'll make this very short, was the liability of the city. The insurance provisions remain the same with the exception of naming the city as an additional insured. We've had a proliferation of new types of vessels as they're defined in the inland rules, which is the rules that govern the activities on the water. Mayor Avery remembers when all of a sudden we had this new device called the jetpack. We went, oh my gosh, what is this? We now have all kinds of new devices on the harbor, and we feel that one of the things we needed to do was certainly protect the city. We just came to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, seeing no further, Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you. Obviously, some of those categories you developed can be easily placed or can accept a couple different operations, but I figured I'd throw a couple out there for staff to consider for us to include. Got the yacht clubs. I don't know what they would fall under. Fuel docks. The Catalina Flyer itself, maybe that falls under one of them pretty easily. And hopefully it's okay to say in front of the mayor, but sailing schools and boat rentals. Are these something that we would easily assign to the 4 existing categories, or are these things that we should consider developing our own categories for? That's more of a question for us to discuss. This is not really my expertise, the harbor, but they seem to be different to me than the actual providers of the water activity. Staff, do you want to chime in, tell me your thoughts on that?
Sure. So fuel docks, those are on land, so they have land requirements, not necessarily, they're not roaming around the harbor. The Catalina Flyer has MAP. They have an existing MAP. Sailing schools and yacht clubs, I'm going to have to double check that one for you.
So we have nonprofit businesses that operate in the city.
Yeah, I
and
don't
they pay
think they have maps.
Well, I'm talking about businesses off the water. Their nonprofit business is got a business license, correct?
Still have to have a business license if you're a
Right.
nonprofit, yes.
So I would think in the case of a yacht club, most of what the yacht club, the members have the boats, they're not paying for passage. They're just enjoying their boats. But some yacht clubs do have a small rental fleet for their members. So if they're taking income for that, that might trigger a MAP. The same with sailing schools. If students are paying a fee, that's whether it's a six-pack or just bareboat, quote-unquote bareboat chartering, that would probably qualify put them in the MAP category, just from my point of view only.
If I could just clarify one point, Mr. Mosher was correct. The clean version that's in the packet is the correct version. The red line was an older version of the red line, so the clean version that's in the packet is correct.
Okay. We don't have any phone calls, do we, on this? Great, thanks. Any further council comments? All right, well, thank you. We'll move on to our next item, 3, Mariners and Dover Shores Neighborhood Traffic Calming Study.
Yes, good afternoon, council members. Dave Webb, your Public Works Director tonight. Tonight we're going to talk to you a little bit about traffic calming measures in a neighborhood. This is in the Dover Shores Mariners neighborhood. Traffic engineer Tony Bryan's here to join us tonight. He's got a presentation for you. I do want to advise you've probably seen this is item 14 in your packet tonight. Because of the nature, it's such a large neighborhood, and because of the interest and also trying to understand this topic, we wanted to provide a study session for you, and then we'll have more chances tonight to talk about it. So I'm going to turn over to Tony if you can go through your presentation. And
good afternoon, Mayor Avery and the City Council, Tony Bryan, the City Traffic Engineer. And I'd like to give the public an opportunity to make some comments, so I want to go ahead and step through this as quickly as I can. So what we're doing here, this is an extension of City Council Policy L26, and that's our traffic management policy. So when we receive requests from the community, they'd like to have traffic calming, speed bumps, whatever they would like to have, we go through this step-by-step process in L26 to consider whether traffic calming measures are met. The two primary criteria we look at are what are the measured speeds in the neighborhood on the streets, what are the traffic volumes. Those are the two main things. If they meet certain criteria, we can continue to look at those streets for that type of traffic calming. Now, in the process, it lays out step by step, which could include neighborhood meetings moving forward depending on the speeds that we measure. And then ultimately, there could be a traffic study prepared and some plans prepared, but if that's warranted, that would be where we would go. Finally, in the end, if you get all the way to that point, there's a neighborhood petition process, and L26 lays out that the requirement is 70% neighborhood support on those streets where we're looking at traffic calming. So this is the study area, Mariners, Dover Shores, a very large neighborhood, over 50 streets within that neighborhood. A few of those streets go through the entire neighborhood. Highland, Santiago, two examples. A lot of the other streets obviously are smaller internal streets within the neighborhood. But again, we decided when we first started talking with the community and they came to us with requests that we would look at this entire neighborhood because there's impacts potentially one street to the next based on what you might be looking at. So there's several parts of the process that we went through. This is the first step in the process. It started off with an informal meeting with the community. There was a group of people. We went to their home. We sat down and met with them. And they talked about the concerns they had, which were primarily speeding on their streets and cut-through traffic, bicycle safety. After that meeting, we got a proposal started with a consultant, and we had started the process of the neighborhood traffic study in October of 2018. And we had our first town hall meeting in November of 2018. Now, we had 3 town hall meetings. For every town hall meeting that we had, we sent out over 1,700 letters. So that gives you an idea of how many homes there are in that neighborhood. We sent out 1,700 letters for each town hall meeting. At the first meeting, we introduced the study. We answered all the questions that we had or that we received from the residents. We gathered their comments, concerns. We wanted to focus on what areas do they have concerns, not generally speed concerns, but what specific areas in the neighborhood do you have concerns? And then from that, after that meeting, we went and did an extensive collection of neighborhood traffic data. Speeds, daily volumes, accident. We collected all the accident data for a 10-year period. We looked at cut-through counts from license plate surveys. We did all of that in February and March of 2019. And then we came back to the community after we collected all that data in May of 2019. We presented the data to them. We said, here's all the information we've collected to let you know. These are the speeds, the volumes, everything that we've found. And then we started to lay out and make sure they understood this is what Council Policy L26 includes, and this is the type of criteria that we're looking at on the individual streets for traffic calming measures. And then we went after that meeting and we started analyzing which streets might meet the qualifications for traffic calming. And then staff and the consultant, we sat down and reviewed, okay, for those streets that might meet the criteria, what would be the appropriate type of traffic calming tool within this neighborhood? Then we came back in September after the summer break with a town hall meeting, the 3rd meeting. And at that meeting then, we presented them with a conceptual improvement plan. This is an idea of where the types of traffic calming could go, what type of traffic calming. We presented that to them. And the idea we came back to them with was speed cushions and edge line striping on 7 different key streets in the neighborhood. So coming out of all the data we collected, we saw that there were 7 streets that met the criteria. The larger, more key, more through type streets in the neighborhood, those were the focus. And then we completed the study in October of 2019. And then we took the final study together with a petition that I prepared and gave that to a neighborhood representative for them to go out into the neighborhood and start to collect signatures. And that's the process in L26. A neighborhood representative is necessary for them to go out and collect those signatures. It's not staff. The community needs to see that, show that support for the project. We don't want to go out and tell them this is what the project's going to be. We want to see them show us the support. And we posted the study on the website in October of 2019. So again, the summary, it's a very large neighborhood, 490 acres, over 3,900 residents in the neighborhood. So we took on a big study area, and I think it's the right way to do it because we knew let's take it on all now in case there's any future requests coming from within that neighborhood. We've got the information, we've got a project that we looked at. The vehicle speeds that cut through traffic, again, the primary concern. In our collection of data through the license plate surveys, we actually did find the cut through traffic was negligible, really less than 10 vehicle trips in peak hour periods during the day. So we found the cut through traffic was negligible. The speeds on the key streets, those larger streets, they ranged from 32 to 38 miles an hour, and that's in our 25 zone. Now that 32 to 38 is what's called the 85th percentile speed, which is the number we look at, and that's the speed that 85% of the traffic is moving at that speed or less. So that ranged from 32 to 38. And the important thing to think about here is that that's a large number. That definitely meets that definition of demonstrated speeding concerns, which is discussed in L26. And typically we see, when we've done a lot of collection of residential speeds in neighborhoods, we see something in the range of 28 to 32 on typical residential streets. We're seeing on these streets those numbers because they're longer, they're wider, and they definitely show that demonstrated speed concern. And so again, L26 criteria was met on the 7 key streets. This is the proposed project. This is what we submitted to the community in the final neighborhood meeting. If you look at the orange dots on there are the proposed locations for speed cushions. And I'll show you in a moment some photographs of speed cushions. The green lines are essentially the combination of an edge line striping and a speed cushion on that street. The red dots are just striping bulb outs, not physically constructing something, but striping a bulb out, giving that narrowed feeling at an intersection. And the light blue stripe is a street where we're just going to put edge line striping on that street, but no speed cushions. So again, the proposed project consisted of a total of 17 sets of speed cushions and edge line striping. We had 5 intersections with the striped bulb outs, and there was edge line striping shown on Tradewinds Lane. And so that was the project that I showed you before visually. This is the project. This is what a typical plan is that we showed in the traffic study. So when the residents had the study, they took it out to the neighborhood, they presented the petition with the study. The residents were able to see these different plans. This is just one segment of Santiago between Galaxy and Holiday. All the other sections of the streets that showed proposed speed cushions and edge line striping and such had this type of plan that the residents could look at. So this is a picture of a different type of speed cushion. Well, this is a standard type of speed cushion, but it's asphalt. And you can see what it is, like a speed bump, but not a speed bump because there's gaps that are in between the different bump sections. So you can see that there's actually a street level section, a gap there. The gaps are set up so that they're spaced wide enough apart that an emergency vehicle can go between and go past the speed cushion without having to slow down. But a typical vehicle has to go over at least a portion of the speed bump. So the typical vehicle has to slow down, whereas the emergency vehicle would not have to slow down. So this is an asphalt version. And then this is a rubber cushion. So you purchase this type of speed cushion and then you install it on the street, you bolt it down to the street. And you can see in this picture how the emergency vehicles are able to go through the slot when it's installed. And the one benefit to a rubber cushion is that because they're bolted down, they can easily be removed as well. So let's say we were to put one out on a street, the resident says, no, we really don't want these now. They've got noise impacts or something that we're not entirely thrilled about. We can pick them up and move them, or pick them up and hold them and put them somewhere else. But you get the flexibility with the rubber cushion that you don't have as much flexibility with the asphalt in terms of putting them in, moving them, replacing them. But the rubber cushions are more expensive, so we have to keep that in mind. This is the edge line striping, so you can see what we're talking about doing. This, in fact, this is Santiago west of Irvine. So this is just on the other side of Irvine, same segment of Santiago, same width. So you get a good idea of what the edge line striping would be. It kind of stripes out a parking lane, if you will, provides that narrowed feeling of the street now that they've defined smaller travel lanes. And so that's what the edge line striping does as a traffic calming tool.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask about something? Can
Mr. O'Neill.
we go back a couple of slides there? So you were saying that an advantage of this is that it can be picked up and removed if we find that it's just not, if residents are complaining too much or.
Right.
I think isn't that kind of the concern about the 70% not being hit, is that we've already received emails coming in complaining about the idea of even putting this anywhere near their own house. And so that's when you're talking about putting something in that's potentially more expensive because there's a chance, perhaps even a likely chance, that we'd have to remove it at some point because we've got a pretty sizable number of residents who chose not to sign the petition over the length of time that was given. You know, we're talking about a concern now of paying more for the potential of removing it later, and that's been a concern, I think, of a lot of people. And so I was concerned that is a concern of mine. The other, so you were on the. Can you go to the next slide? So one of the other ideas is, is people don't really complain about paint. They complain about things that go in front of their houses. Up on the Newport Coast area, we had an issue up in Chambord where there was a lot of speeding up there, and we used chokers. The additional paint, was that an option that was discussed in terms of causing people to view lanes as smaller than they actually are in order to convince people to slow down?
Striping a choker itself?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, we didn't look at striping chokers like mid-block striping. No. We looked at the striping of like that bulb out narrowing of the striping at the intersections themselves, but we didn't look at it mid-block. No. And striping, it provides a level of traffic calming, gives you that restricted feel. But for short little segments of a narrow stripe, I don't think it's that effective. You need to have that straight, that longer shot view of a narrowed roadway, I think, for edgeline striping to be more effective.
I guess then two other quick questions. Could you go back one more slide? On these, Jim Mosher brought up a couple of good questions. One of them was, so this works for the wheelbase for our firefighters. What about our police cars? And what about, does this actually make it more dangerous for people on bicycles who are actually going to be encouraged to go into the middle of the road now instead of around cars?
Right. It doesn't necessarily address the police vehicles because they don't have the wider, longer axle lengths that the emergency vehicles, the fire trucks, ambulances have. So it doesn't necessarily address that police vehicle. Bicycles, they're usually installed so that there is a distance between the curb and the first cushion, so the bicycle can ride between the curb and the cushion. That we don't install them right up next to the curb.
No, I'm asking if when people park in front of their homes or people so I mean, this is a residential area. We don't have any I'm not aware of red curbs in that area for the most part. So people park on the street all the time. So if someone parks anywhere near around these, we're now encouraging the bicycles to go into the middle of the road instead of
a little bit, perhaps a little further into the roadway, yes, outside of the parked vehicle.
Okay, all right, thanks.
And an important part of this as well is that L26, when we talk about the putting in speed cushions or speed bumps or anything of that nature, and there's a concern of the resident for noise associated with that, then yes, we do work with those residents that are adjacent to where we're looking at putting in a speed cushion to make sure we're placing it in a location where those neighbors that live there, they're comfortable with it being there. They support the project. So we know we've got the map and we can see the segments of the different roads like Highland and Santiago and Commodore where people are clearly, they've signed the petition, they're supportive of putting in speed cushions. We want to make sure we're putting it in spots, and we think we can put them in spots where people are comfortable with it and not have it right in front of somebody's house if they're not comfortable with it being right in front of their house. And that is an important thing that before we finalize the location, we would have to work with those residents. And so here's a couple of pictures, just examples of the different streets. Santiago, it's a 40-foot wide street. Most of the streets in that neighborhood are 40-foot wide curb to curb with parking on both sides. Dover Drive is the narrower street in the neighborhood, and it's 32-foot wide. And this is the petition process that I talked about. We provided that petition together with the plans, this full study that showed those plans, with language in the petition so that it was clear to the residents that we, look at these plans. Are you comfortable? Can you support this project? If yes, then sign the petition. That went to staff, or that went from staff to the neighborhood representative in October of 2019. And then there was a period of time in early 2020, basically from January to July, that we didn't hear any communication at all from the residents in the neighborhood. Weren't sure of the status, weren't sure if there was that support in the neighborhood for it overall. And so because of that, and because we were looking at the COVID budget in May of 2019, we decided we're not seeing that interest right now. It's not coming to us. Let's take the project funding out of the CIP budget. So that decision was made in 2019, May of 2019. And then subsequent to that, after July, and between July and October, there was more activity in the neighborhood to circulating the petition, getting signatures. We received a petition back from the neighborhood representative, and those are the different streets with the projects, and those were the levels of support, signed petition support on those streets. And again, 70% support is actually what it says in L26, but it does give the council the opportunity to waive that if they choose. But the key thing looking here is that Polaris is obviously the one street where we just were not seeing the support, and that's whether it was on Polaris or even some of the cul-de-sacs that come off of Polaris, which we wanted to include those cul-de-sacs in that process because Polaris is the way in and out for where they live. They would have to go over a speed cushion to get home every day, wherever they went.
Ms.
So
Dixon, do you have a comment?
When was this, sir, the petition survey done before the tragic accident? When did that occur, the tragic accident, when someone was killed?
In July of 2020.
So this is when the neighborhood concern really elevated in July?
Right. They had the study at that point in October of 2019. They had the study, they had the petition. They were starting the process of collecting the signatures. We hadn't heard anything. But then when that accident occurred, then a lot more interest started to happen. I started to get a lot of communication, obviously, from the residents. What do we need to do? Where can I sign something? Mm-hmm. And pointed them to that representative. And I think the process of collecting signatures picked up after that.
So this data reflects that post-accident?
It reflects all the signatures that were received after it was submitted to them in October of 2019.
Okay, thank you.
And again, Polaris, you can see the percent support there. And as I mentioned, the cul-de-sac, 3 cul-de-sac streets coming off Polaris were included in that petition process. So the cost estimate, again, if we look at the different types of speed cushions, the asphalt versus the rubber, you can see the difference in cost. 17 cushions being the entire project, and the edgeline striping at $10,500 for 42,000 lineal feet of edgeline striping, and then adding in a contingency, and those are the total cost estimates for the project. Now, we show 17 cushions here. If we were to look at Polaris, that had 2 speed cushions on Polaris shown. If we were to take those out, obviously we'd drop the cost down, depending on the type of cushion, anywhere from $9,000 to $13,000 overall if the speed cushions were not installed on Polaris. But yet I think I would continue to maybe look at the striping on Polaris if we didn't do the cushions. So the proposed recommendations for tonight, and this being on the regular agenda on item 14, receive and file the study, and then either the decision being to uphold the policy requirement for the 70% support and then to not proceed, or to waive that 70% requirement for policy L26 and then to direct staff to go ahead and advertise the project for installation of the measures on all of the listed streets except Polaris, again looking at the percent, and then appropriate the funding at the time of the project award. Do you have any questions?
Could you explain the importance?
Right. Dave brought up something important. Again, the reason why we're looking at all of these streets as part of one project, as part of one package, is that we can't really selectively pick, let's do it on Highland but not do it on Commodore, or let's do it on Santiago but not do it on Highland or something, because if you start putting in these types of traffic calming measures on one street but not parallel streets, you're going to look at possibly shifting traffic over to the next street over. So you have to look at this as a comprehensive project with all of those streets playing off of each other.
Great. Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you. I totally reject that assertion you just made, but I understand where you're coming from. I think that we do have enough knowledge of neighborhood to say where the hot spots are and where there's no support, and where there is, and if there's some place that pops up, we can address it then. And that would be my recommendation on this, is that, can you pull up the map that shows different streets again?
This particular map or the earlier one?
Yeah, this one's great. Can you show me where Polaris is with do you have a pointer by chance?
Polaris is right at the bottom. Like
that's
if you
right.
look at that picture right at the very bottom with the two cushions, that's Polaris.
Do you have a way to show it on the screen? There's people watching at home and people in the other room, so.
Do we have a?
Yeah, or the mouse is great too.
There you go.
That's Polaris.
So where does it start and where does it end?
Polaris roughly runs from, it goes up at the corner there where Santiago ends at Westcliff and runs along, goes past the NAC, kind of ends at that section of Galaxy as Galaxy loops around and comes into Santiago.
So it's a little bit almost of a detour. It's not really a way you would take to pass through the neighborhood. And if you're going down there, you probably have the intent to go to Evening Star, one of those other streets.
Or the NAC.
Yeah, that's right. The NAC, good point.
Right.
Can you show us where the NAC is on this?
It's
Right there.
roughly off of White Cliffs Drive, coming in off that street and into that area.
It's interesting though, because those who are most impacted by it are not requesting something be done about it right there. So I personally would want to take that off the table for the sake of both cost and support in the community. So now that reduces the estimate by, you said $13,000 roughly if it were to be dump bumps.
Right. If it was rubberized, roughly.
And then the next street that seems like it have a lot of support is Mariners. Can you show us where Mariners is with the mouse?
Mariners is, kind of runs east-west. There it is, there.
Okay. That actually is a little bit more of a major street.
That's more of a main street coming into the neighborhood from Irvine, from Dover. Yeah, it takes a lot of traffic and brings it into the neighborhood.
Okay. And then Tradewinds.
Tradewinds is that blue line at the very top of this particular picture right there. That's Tradewinds.
Okay. And that is really a connector.
Yeah, it serves as maybe a link between Santiago and Commodore, but more so it just serves the homes on Tradewinds. It's not really an alternate route, if you will. It functions on its own.
So for those three streets that we just mentioned, you're proposing a reasonable solution is striping only, because they're not really supported as much, and it's not controversial as opposed to speed bumps, which are controversial.
For some people.
Some people, yes, definitely.
And Mariners, again, Mariners does have one speed cushion shown near Dover. It's the one section between Highland and Santiago that is only striping, where that blue segment is. So more of the easterly segment of Mariners would be striping, but there's one speed cushion shown on Mariners. The orange dot right near
Yeah,
Dover.
I see.
Right,
And-
there's one there as you're entering into the neighborhood.
So the specific locations proposed for speed cushions are based on your traffic engineering.
Right.
And those can be moved a little bit based on maybe a really loud neighbor or concern.
Right, shifted a little this way, a little that
Yeah.
way, 1-2 houses this way, that way. It's not going to make a big difference from the overall standpoint to do that.
So how many total then are you, if we took out Polaris, because you have two there, correct?
Right.
And you have any other ones in the low ranking, the low support groups?
Well, at that point, then, the entire neighborhood would have 15 sets
Okay.
of speed cushions.
So 15 sets, you didn't put the dollar amount or 15 because you just estimated high to be safe.
Right, we'll skip ahead to the cost estimate. Right, so if we just subtracted out about, let's say if it was the rubber cushions, subtract out about $13,000 off of that 145, and you'd be at, 130 to 131.
And then same for the asphalt takeoff? Or how
Take
much
off 9,000 off the asphalt cost.
All right, and if you were to be considering this neighborhood without the concerns about the speed bumps, just remove it entirely and just wanting to address the range you showed of people who speed in the 85% of 34, 38, or whatever you gave number.
Right.
Is it your professional opinion that there should be at least some sort of calming measures like striping, regardless of how people feel about the speed bumps, or
I'm sorry, whether we should do just a striping project in itself, or?
At a minimum, if this were brought to you and you were aware of the speeds.
Right.
And you didn't know how the public felt about it, you were just aware of the speeds.
Right.
Would it be your opinion that the safe thing to do was to do a couple of things like striping or other measures for calming?
Yes, I think the things that you do see from a traffic calming standpoint that clearly reduce speeds, the most, that you get the most benefit, is going to be a speed bump or a speed cushion. Striping will bring speeds down to a certain amount, but they're not going to bring speeds down as much as putting in a speed cushion. So with that higher range of speeds, the 32 up to as much as 38 we saw in some segments, then yes, I think a speed cushion, a physical change to the roadway would definitely bring the speeds down more effectively than just a striping project.
What I'm trying to do, Tony, is just eliminate what's not as controversial and sort of what's in the best interest, just from a purely standpoint, not democratic standpoint. Just
Okay.
If you just had unlimited budget
Okay.
and you were to look at this neighborhood,
Right.
would you say, yes, the neighborhood would benefit for the sake of safety with some striping and bulbing or whatever, blend of anything except for speed bumps at this point?
Oh, and except for bumps or cushions?
Well, we would deal with that with the public input, but I'm saying if that was not to be considered yet, would you consider this to be a bright project to use those measures?
I think at the minimum, we should be looking at striping. I think there is clearly a benefit to having some type of physical change to the roadway in this neighborhood. Speed cushions are the most effective. We've used physical chokers constructed on some streets in some neighborhoods. The port streets have a couple of chokers. In Newport Heights, there's chokers on Cliff Drive. That's another option to doing something. They're not as effective as the speed cushion. So we felt like because the speeds that we were seeing on these streets were at the level that they were, that the speed cushion reducing the speeds more than other types of traffic calming, that we would propose that.
So it's my opinion that the chokers actually make the neighborhood look nice as well. So I personally like them, but you didn't put that in the cost estimate. You just basically went
right
visual, aside from physical structures, excluding, or the only physical structures you really contemplate at this point are the speed bumps.
That's correct.
But the choking is an option as well.
It could be. We could come back and look at chokers as well. You have to fit them in because there's a lot of driveways on these streets, so you have to figure out where you can fit in the chokers between the driveways, and you would lose on-street parking with the chokers. So, but we didn't get into that because I felt that the cushions would lower the speeds more than the chokers would. So we went ahead and proposed the one calming measure that would you'd see reduce speeds more so.
And how about Eastside Costa Mesa has a lot of those center medians. It's a little different, but it's similar to a choker. What's your thought on those?
Like a median
Yeah,
itself?
like a little flower
Right,
plant in the center.
Right,
yeah.
and we did the same thing in Newport Heights on Cliff Drive as you go west of Irvine. We do have some short segments of median there as well. So that's another option again, but overall less speed reduction with medians, less speed reduction with chokers than you get from speed bumps or speed cushions.
So you put that in the same category as the chokers as far as effectiveness?
Medians, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
great, thank you.
Mr. Duffield.
Thank you, Commodore. He was the Commodore. Mr. Mayor, excuse me. So, this is my district, and this has been going on far longer than the horrific accident. And I've gotten a lot of people calling over the years, and it's just gotten worse. So, I used to use the NAC a lot, and I know that when I was running a bit late, I was tempted to speed to get there on time. And Highlands, Santiago, and Commodore all feed into getting to the NAC. And I think as the NAC has become so popular, we haven't really emphasized that, but it has become really popular. It puts a burden on the neighborhood, and that's not just the NAC, but I do want to emphasize that the NAC contributes a lot to this. And so I'm very supportive of what the staff has done. They've listened to everyone. I've learned my lesson that traffic calming is not easy. It's very complicated. And I respect the work that you guys have done, and I would support these efforts, and I would hope that I was shocked that not more people got behind this, because I heard a lot of people complaining, but 71%, 61%, 61%, San Diego, Commodore, those are pretty good. It's getting awful close to 70. And the other streets, I would say, probably would not be as critical, but these three, something's got to be done, and I'm hoping that we move forward and certainly try these efforts because they have been so vetted, and you guys have done, from your professional standpoint, the best you can do, and that's what I'm hoping we can implement. Thank you.
Any other council comments? Okay, we'll go out to the public. Sorry.
Hi, City Council and City staff. I submitted a letter yesterday for the record, but I just want to highlight one or two sentences in that letter that I think are important for everybody to realize, and I think it was brought up earlier in the presentation. I've lived in Dover Shore since 1980. I grew up on Mariners Drive. I currently live in the section of Highland between Irvine Avenue and Mariners Drive. And I've seen the neighborhood change over the years. The traffic counts have increased tremendously. The speeds have increased tremendously. And obviously the distracted driving, in particular with cell phones, is a new phenomenon in the last 15, 20 years. The point I want to bring to your attention is this. In my section of Highland Drive, according to your traffic study, 84% of the drivers are going between 26 and 40 miles an hour. 4% are going between 41 and 55 miles an hour. That means 12% of the drivers in my section of Highland Drive are complying with the speed limit. And to me, that's just unacceptable. And if you sit out there on a Sunday evening like I do and watch people go by, that is the accurate percentage. Basically, everybody is speeding down Highland. And I would suggest to the council member who indicated that perhaps calming devices were too noisy, come out and hang out on Highland with me on a Sunday night and watch the Lamborghinis go up and down the street at 45 miles an hour in first gear. That's a hell of a lot louder than any traffic calming mitigation measures you might implement. Thank you.
Do we have any other public comment?
Hi, Derek Landry, Dover Shores resident, kind of spearheaded the initiative for this traffic reducing measure. I just have a couple points. I have some stuff I'll address at the other session, but a few points that Tony brought up. The petition that was given to us, it required to go door to door, and we had a pandemic. So to think that the community was not behind us, it was just physically impossible to go door to door and get someone to sign this. And so we took it upon ourselves to create what we thought is a effective manner in doing so, and created, you can text it to me, you can email it to me, I'll come over and pick it up at your house. And so we started to get that momentum, and unfortunately we had the accident, and then I think people just started to wake up. Another point that the mayor brought up about, will this bring in bikes into the street? Mayor, come to our neighborhood. This is kids riding in the streets. I ride my bike in the streets. This isn't going to change anything in terms of anybody running or riding in the streets. It already exists. And the third point is, I applaud bringing in speed cushions, but we got 61% for the most aggressive and most least desirable speed reducing measure, speed cushions. If we introduce, like Councilman Muldoon, talked about minimal medians or some curb outs or things that are more appealing for the value of our homes, I think you'd have way more support than you have. We got 61% for a speed cushion, which is very, very, very controversial. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Mayor Avery, members of the council, this is Jim Mosher again. First, I'd like to thank Councilmember O'Neill for raising two of my questions. However, the question about how this affects police cars, I didn't actually hear an answer as to whether the police department supports speed bumps. We don't have very many in our city. The little stretch of Tustin is the only piece that I know of. How does it affect police response times? And I assume it, although the fire department is okay, it must slow down their response a little bit to negotiate through these bumps. As to the bicyclists, I continue to have some concern that these will be a hazard for people on bicycles, particularly at night if they are placed and not visible in a location with poor lighting. I personally have encountered speed bumps in Costa Mesa that came as a little bit of a surprise to me. Didn't fall down, but I think that's something to consider. The striping, I'm sure, is needed. The speed cushions, as was mentioned, is a little more controversial. And as to the investment in this particular community, I understand their concern. As a resident slightly outside this area, I would wonder how these speed results and the volume of traffic on these particular streets compares to the results that we would have if we did a survey of any other street of similar width in a similar neighborhood that is posted for 25 miles per hour. Is this really unusual in this area or not? And then finally, traffic engineer Brian said there's a concern about diverting traffic from one street to another if you don't implement this on all the streets. And looking at the map, it seems clear that the speed cushions on Santiago are going to divert traffic to Antigua Way and Galaxy Drive. People in the neighborhood will soon learn that they can avoid 3 speed bumps by going on Antigua and I guess 8 by going on Galaxy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi. Sorry. My name is Amy Vauderay. I live on Commodore Road. I'm here to speak to you today. First of all, thank you for considering this and all the work that has gone into it. Our entire community appreciates it. But I'm here on behalf of my husband and my family and our community with an urgent plea to have these speed cushions installed in our neighborhood and other traffic calming measures as well. We face a daily battle with careless and reckless drivers on our streets. Several of our neighborhood roads are known cut-throughs for drivers traveling in and through our area. They cut through our little neighborhood to avoid traffic and traffic lights on Irvine Boulevard. With little to no signage, police presence, or speed bumps, there is no deterrent to prevent drivers from using our streets as these shortcuts and speedways. Any number of my neighbors and I can count dozens of cars per hour racing down our streets just to get through or pass through our neighborhood. There's an inadequate speed calming devices in place that would deter drivers. There is no warning that these are small family areas filled with children and pets at play. There's no reminder that there are consequences for their driving habits and patterns. There's nothing to stop them from speeding through our neighborhood. Many of us have had major concerns for years about the growing number of speeding vehicles on our streets. We've requested this help in the past, as you've heard tonight. Now, after suffering this great loss, in our loving community, we are more determined and desperate than ever to slow down and reduce the traffic on our streets. In July, my sweet 15-year-old boy, Johnny, was killed by a careless driver while he was just skateboarding in front of our home with his best friend and his 2 younger brothers. The scene was terrifying, horrific, and tragic. It was also preventable. Johnny was a loud, vivacious community member, playing, laughing, and living his young life, joy-filled and loving our beautiful community. Accidents happen, but they don't have to. There are many ways to calm the traffic. Had previously requested calming measures been in place, Johnny would most likely still be here with us today. The grief of losing our sweet Johnny hasn't just struck our family. His loss, this preventable accident, has struck our entire community, not just Dover Shores, but most of Newport Beach. It has struck everyone because Johnny was the epitome of a typical Newport Beach kid. He was young, vibrant, full of joy in life. He loved the outdoors and the beach. He loved his schools and his friends. He loved riding his bike and skateboarding freely around town, making friends and sharing community everywhere he went. We never thought he would be in danger doing something as simple as skateboarding in his front yard. He was so young and excited about life. He had just gotten his driver's permit. He was about to start his sophomore year. He had his first girlfriend. He was a volunteer surf instructor. He was a neighborhood babysitter. He was a cousin, a friend, and a big brother. He had this huge, bright future ahead of him. But that future was stolen. It was ripped from him when a careless driver used our street as a shortcut to get to her final destination. She was most likely not going the speed limit. She was not a local resident. There were no warnings to her to drive carefully or mind the laws. Had there been better safety measures like a speed bump, she most likely would have been moving at a slower speed and Johnny would not be gone from us forever. Our friends and neighbors ache for us, not just because who he was as a person, but because everyone in our community can imagine this same tragedy happening to them because of the rampant careless driving, increase in traffic volumes, and no deterrents or calming measures in place. We need help. We need changes. We need your help to make our residential streets safer. We need you to protect us and to save lives. The city has taken several steps towards making our boardwalks and trails safer with calming measures against motorized bikes and scooters to protect pedestrians. So why not our residential streets too, where cars and trucks are much larger and traveling at much higher speeds? People don't only live in Newport Beach because of the weather and beaches. We live here because of the community and lifestyle. We have this idyllic setting in our little neighborhood, an environment with our great wide streets, close parks, and great schools. These environments invite and allow us to raise our families outside our own four walls, where kids play basketball in the streets, build skateboard ramps in their driveways, have trampolines and volleyball courts in their front yards for all to share. These are old school neighborhoods where neighbors are friends, gathering on the corners to chat and share stories as we watch our children play. It's where we can still allow our kids to walk to school, ride their bikes to the park, and feel safe roaming free. This is the main reason we choose to live here in this amazing Newport Beach, because the community offers a lifestyle and a connection that you probably can't find in many other places in Southern California. But this lifestyle, this community, it's at risk. The increase in traffic and the lack of control over the traffic volume and speed is threatening our very special way of life. Talk to the residents of our neighborhood and you will hear countless stories of near-miss accidents where drivers don't adhere to speed limits and stop signs. Near-miss stories of children nearly being hit by speeding drivers racing through our neighborhood just to save a minute or two in their commute. Our children, our neighbors, all of us here tonight deserve the right to preserve this way of life and keep our streets safe and to keep our sense of community intact. But people are worried. Residents are scared. Lives are at risk. We can slow down traffic. We can protect our families and our friends. We can protect our community. We can save lives. And I know that people complain about noise and it'll inhibit their way of life or their little 2 minutes to get home from work or to the NAC. But do they need this tragedy to strike their home to then change their tune? We need help. So I'm begging you guys to really, really consider helping us with these safety and traffic calming measures. Thank you.
We're very sorry for your loss. Does anyone else care to speak?
Hi, my name is Jim Hartung. I'm a resident of Dover Shores, living on 1612 Santiago for nearly 8 years. And I just want to add a couple of comments to those of the audience here that I think bear repeating. I'm supportive of the general objective of calming traffic speeds in our neighborhood. It's an acute problem. But I specifically want to recommend that we take physical measures to decrease speed versus things like the painted lines that narrow the perception of the roadway width, et cetera. We live on a curve on Santiago, and I routinely see people accelerate around the curve, and even if they had the lines painted on, they wouldn't be able to see in time to slow down and avoid hitting someone who might be either crossing the street, riding a bicycle, or, God forbid, chasing a ball, as my children do. So I just want to make sure that we go as far as we need to solve the problem. The second thing I'd like to raise is the expressed concern by some of our neighbors. I was one of the neighbor residents who canvassed the neighborhood to get the petition signed. And in general, I found a very strong support from our neighbors. A couple of people expressed objections of one sort or another about noise. The other one that I heard commonly was, or in a few instances, was the potential impact on the value of their home. And I just want to point out that if that's a concern, they ought to go to Emerald Bay and some of the other neighborhoods in this general area where speed bumps are a fact of life, and I don't think the property values in those areas have been impacted. So I just wanted to encourage the council to support this. Please take concrete measures, physical measures, ideally, to reduce the speed in our neighborhood. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Council and Mayor. We come here today. My name is Elise Avila Smith. I live on 1400 Mariners Drive. One quick thing I think to point out is at the end of Mariners Drive, there is an elementary school, which is an important reason I think we need to have a speed cushion or something of that sort on that street. It does create a lot of traffic. So we do come here today and we ask you to seriously consider your approval. We need these safety measures put in place in our neighborhood. You know, everyone talks about this tragedy, but I think we need to remember that this tragedy was a boy. It has brought his family to their knees. It has brought our beautiful little neighborhood to their knees, and it's awful. And we can fix it. We can make our neighborhood a safer place. The fact that someone was using Commodore as a shortcut because they didn't want to drive down Irvine, they didn't want to drive down 17th Street, it should never be a shortcut to go through a neighborhood. It should never save you time. And I think we need to really think about that. It has to stop. As he said, for those who fight this, go to Emerald Bay, go to Big Canyon, go to Three Arch Bay. There are plenty of places that have very expensive homes that all have speed cushions in place. So we come to you today asking for you to protect our community, to stand up for what is right for our community, to create a safer community, a safer neighborhood, and to take a moment and imagine that you live on my street, that you live on their street, that your kids cross those streets 100 times a day. Think about your kids walking to school on those streets. Do you want a safer community? I know your answer to this would be yes. And like we say, above all things, do this for the families who live in Dover Shores, do this for our grieving community, and do it for Johnny. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers? Do we have anybody on the phones? We have 3.
You live on my street.
Hello?
Your kids
Hello? Are you there?
Yes. Do you want us to?
All right.
I know your answer.
There's some background noise.
Hey, come on. No, I did nothing.
Mute whatever you've got on, please.
I have turned down the.
Yes, please do.
Hello, thank you everyone for your time. Let us turn down the mic. This is Paul DeRosso on 2021 Highland Drive. And I'm just going to keep this short. I would ask you to, albeit good arguments that are emotional and monetary against doing everything we can, but I don't think it relates to the loss of life, and we really have to put that first. And I echo the comment. Coming to Highland on the weekend, you will see the speeding, you will see the impact it has on the neighborhood, and if we don't make a decision, we don't do something different, I don't know how we're going to get a different result. So thank you for your time. Appreciate everyone's efforts.
Thank you.
Good arguments that are
Hello?
monetary,
Please mute your
doing
device.
everything, but I don't think it relates to loss of life. To put that first, I echo the comment. Island on the weekend, see the speeding, see the impact it has on
Can we
and decision. We don't do
go to the next call?
we're going to get a different.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead with your comments.
Okay, I'm Glenda Lewis. I live on Pescador Drive. I've lived here since 1976. I am totally against the speed bumps or the speed cushions or whatever they're called. When I first moved here, or shortly thereafter, we used to have a lot of police that used to patrol and watch the stop signs and watch the cars. They did radar, and they watched cars that were parked the wrong way on the street. And that seemed to take care of a lot of things. But that doesn't happen anymore because I do not see the police around very much. The next thing, also, I think we should try something else. Like, I'm not against, like, the speed lines and some way to control it, but I'm just absolutely not for the bumps at all. And you're not getting the percentage. I think we should try something like the lines and that to take care of it before we go to that other extreme. Also, I see a new problem also with a lot of these young children now, probably junior high, maybe a little bit upper elementary school. They're riding these electric bikes. And believe me, that is a big problem because I was coming on West Cliff the other day, and I actually had to speed out or to cut around because a couple of them were on electric bikes, and they weren't slowing down at all. So I think we need more police reinforcement, and I think that would control a lot of stuff in this area. So I did send a letter yesterday as well about this, because Costa Mesa has put that stuff in, like on 19th Street and that seems to have really calmed things down. And I'm more so for the lines and that. I think when they put the petitions in the middle of the street with trees and that, they look very pretty. But if you go up Broadway Street, because I own properties over there as well, those middle things are hit. You can see where the tires are rubbing them all the time. I guess they work, but I think they're a little bit of a nuisance. So anyway, that's my opinion, and I just hope we can solve this.
Thank you. That's it for the calls? 2 more. Hello?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, please mute whatever you've got on there. Thank you.
Okay, is that better?
Yep, please go ahead.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
This is Chris Bugler. I live on Highland Drive with my wife and 2-year-old daughter. We've been here for over 10 years, and I have to say in the last 5, traffic seems to be noticeably more aggressive and faster. I mean, people just drive fast. There's a lot of large SUVs, like the other gentleman said, exotic vehicles. I have nothing against that. I love cars, but man, in first gear, they haul ass, and they're fun to watch, but it's very dangerous. There's also a ton of work vehicles now that drive down the street. People are doing a lot of construction, and every day there's vehicles loaded up with tons of stuff that I know could not stop doing 45 miles an hour, and that's an everyday occurrence. I just want to say Highland Drive is not an extension of Irvine Boulevard. I mean, the speed limit is not 45 miles an hour, but people drive like that. There's just got to be something that we can do, if not speed bumps, which I actually don't mind, anything. I mean, anything we can do. And I'm just going to close with this. There's nothing more powerless of a feeling than that of the safety of my daughter in the hands of a 2-ton work truck going by my house at 45 miles an hour. And that happens every single day. So I just hope we can do something, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next. Hello?
Hi, are you ready for my call?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Dan Cohen, and my family has lived here on Highland Drive. The home was built in 1957. We would love to see some sort of traffic calming efforts done. But my personal question is, can the engineers come up with a better design than the speed bumps like are on 16th Street? You have to slow down to 5 miles an hour, and really the goal is to get people just to drive the speed limit. The same thing with the pillows. There's some over on Tustin Avenue by 23rd. They're not really designed to allow you to go over at a legal speed limit. Interestingly, on Highland Drive at Estelle, there's just a normal drain swale, and the cars, when they go over that, over 25 miles an hour, you can hear them hit, bottom out, and they don't do it a second time. Maybe something like that, a swale, could be looked into, or I think it's Emerald Bay. There's maybe Beacon Bay where they have sort of a double speed bump that's a very long, elongated design, where if you go over it at the speed limit, it's kind of like going over a whoop-de-choo, but when you speed, you will bottom out your shocks, and especially if it's a double one. Anyway, that's my concern, is that the existing technology that they're proposing is overkill for what they're trying to achieve, but of course, safety's the end goal for everybody. So, and one thing I would like to say is there's a couple of exotic cars that live on Highland Drive, and the people that live around here that I've, well, not blanket, but this couple of people who live here on Highland Drive, they drive 25 on the nose because they know they're in the crosshairs and they want to be good neighbors. So not all of the exotic cars are going fast. But anyway, good luck. I hope you can find a solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no more public comment, we'll bring it back to the dais. Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple comments. This is the second time in 6 years that those of us who were elected in 2014 have listened to a community and parents who have lost a child due to a traffic accident on our city streets. This is the second time. And we're still trying to solve this challenge in Newport Heights where the first accident occurred. And a tragedy. And now we have a second tragedy. I just wonder about all the different alternatives that we can maximize safety. And I've seen those landscape medians. From a traffic engineering's perspective, are they more effective than speed bumps?
No, actually, from a traffic calming toolbox, if you will, the speed bumps or the speed cushions reduce the speeds.
So they're the maximum.
More than other tools.
And also three times we've gone through our city budget process where the police department has recommended additional traffic officer reinforcement, and the council has denied that for cost reasons. And when the person who spoke said that years ago there used to be more traffic patrol, that's true. And I think, how many more deaths do we have to experience in our community? I mean, two children in 6 years is too many. And we need more. We can't have a police on every corner, but they need to be visible. And I know our police chief is sitting out here. I mean, I don't even know how many traffic motor officers we have anymore, but we're down 2 or 3 that you've asked for in the last 3 budget cycles. And I know that Councilmember Brenner, when she first got on the council, and Mr. Mosher mentioned this in his comments, that we talked about a planning and traffic safety committee. I don't know where that is. So we've been talking a lot about this, and we put the burden on our staff to do the great studies that you've done, as always do, very professional. And here we are trying to appease different opinions. Some people don't want them, some people do. I believe we need to have a holistic system of how we keep our high traffic areas safer and our community streets safer. It's a combination of policing, the traffic motor officers. It's a combination of better signage and these physical structural changes. The painting is somewhat effective. So it's a combination. Similarly, what we did on Bayside Drive a few years ago, now we've put these landscape medians. I wonder, do we do an analysis of how that's reduced? I mean, we have the flashing lights and the speed lights. That's on a more, it's not commercial, but it's a more heavily traveled roadway, so we could have we have crosswalks and blinking lights. But I just wonder, how has that been effective in reducing calming traffic speeds?
The speed trailer or the flashing speed sign?
Well, and the medians that we now have, the landscape center dividers.
Well, they will reduce the speeds roughly 2 to 3 miles an hour at the most. And then sometimes, especially the speed radar signs, you'll see a reduction in speeds initially for a certain amount of time, and then people that regularly drive the roadway become accustomed that it's there, and the overall effect doesn't last as long, but the message is there for the people that aren't familiar with it. But there's no question in my experience and in other cities' experience that the physical speed cushion will reduce speeds more because you have to drive over it versus a choker or a median, because you don't have to drive over something with those types of traffic calming tools. And the other thing, when you look at something like a choker or a median in a neighborhood like this, where there's just so many driveways going along these streets, you have to fit them into where you can, and that means that sometimes a median itself may not be long enough to really be effective, because at that point then you're building a median to where somebody's coming, let's say going in a northbound direction, they may not be able to turn into their driveway at that point. They may have to go a little bit further and whip a U-turn and come back to go into their driveway. So there's downsides to medians when you're in a neighborhood that's just driveway after driveway after driveway. So that's something to consider if we were to look at like a median, is are there places we can fit them in? But to come back again, the speed cushions, the reason why I felt that was the best tool here was because you do see that most effect from that.
Okay, well, I hope tonight, we're still in the study session, I guess, so we're not taking action until later. I'm fully supportive of what we need to do, but in addition to that, during our budget process this spring, I, once again, and maybe joined by others, to propose an additional, or to look at our traffic officer patrol complement and what we need to do to enhance it. I mean, I hear this in my neighborhood on Lido, that we don't see the traffic patrol people but a few times. I mean, they do I'm not being critical, because there are only a few of them. We need more. And I don't know if it's 1 or 2 or 3, but over the last 3 or 4 years, the police chief has requested up to 3, I believe. And it needs to be analyzed, but at least I would like to state that publicly now, that we need to have more police presence in our high traffic neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods, because I think that's an element that is a consistent thread that runs through this. And it's traffic calming on a continual basis. Not permanent, but they come on enough presence that they become a deterrent. So, okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you. I think it's probably established that universally accepted that the striping is good. I thought Will's question was actually thoughtful, and he's a great father, so he's considering how to figure out how to do this, not looking to not do what's right. So to go back to the quieter speed bump question, is the rubber louder or are the asphalt ones louder?
I don't have as much experience, other than I would think that the asphalt one might be, just because of the material, but the noise is coming more so from the sound of the vehicle. Let's say it's a truck and there's something in the back of the truck and they go over and whatever's bouncing around in the back of the truck, that's where you're going to hear the noise. So that's not going to change whether it's an asphalt or a rubberized cushion.
But that noise comes from essentially a dramatic change.
Right.
So,
You're gonna get the vehicle itself, the shocks and the vehicle. Plus, if you do get those trucks that go over it, that's where you may hear more of the noise. But it won't make a big difference whether it's asphalt or rubber.
Okay, how about the shape of it? Meaning, the gentleman on the phone called, I agreed with what he said, a smoother speed bump. Maybe it's a slower increase and decrease, but someone could maintain something closer to the speed limit, and I think that would prevent people from doing the stop and go speeding contest, because they could still travel at a comfortable speed. Did we consider those kind of speed bumps, or do we have those anywhere in the city?
All the speed bumps that we have, and we started out, in fact, Tustin's the only street that has these rubberized cushions, and we thought, well, let's do that as a trial on Tustin, see how they work. We have a number of streets in the city now that go back, grandfathered in from years ago, have the asphalt speed bumps. They're built to a 2.5-inch height, and they're designed so that 25 miles an hour is the comfortable speed over that asphalt speed bump. The same thing with these rubberized cushions as well. They're designed for 25 miles an hour, so that you really shouldn't be going anything more than 25 over that, or you will feel it. So they're both really designed for that, to bring speeds down to the residential 25 miles an hour.
Okay, so which speed bumps make it uncomfortable, so you have to basically all but stop and go 5 miles per hour?
Everybody seems to look at the old, what you would see in a parking lot type of speed bump, but that's not truly a speed bump. We don't want to go anything, we don't want to have really abrupt speed bumps or speed cushions. I've gotten comments from people over the years that say, well, I have a low profile vehicle and anything more than 2.5, 3 inches, and I'm having a problem, going past that. I'm scraping the bottom of my vehicle or something like that. So I think 2.5, 3 inches is the number, and that's what we've been using.
No, but there's no difference in noise as regards to rubber or asphalt, except that rubber might be quieter, but you're not sure.
Right. No, we haven't really tested that, but I don't think you're going to see a big difference in the noise factor.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is two problems. One, I think, is that it's an older design neighborhood, similar to what you see a lot in Los Angeles, sort of a grid layout, or it feels like that, especially if you come from Costa Mesa. So you might not really register, and when you pull in, that this is a residential neighborhood. So I personally think that we need to do something more like medians at the entryways of all the streets where the curb allows a chance to still get into your driveway. So people who enter this neighborhood know this is a residential neighborhood, even subconsciously. It feels like someplace where you're not welcome to drive through quickly, and there's not going to be a straight shot. I personally support striping everywhere, and I support a speed bump as well in the neighborhoods where they have 60-ish. The ones under 60, so Trade Winds, Mariners, Polaris, I think probably aren't the best to begin with right now. Who knows? That could change. I am curious, how can we do this? Is there a way to do this where we don't put, we may put the first half of speed bumps in, and then we see a couple of days later how it is, and if there's a dramatic change, we may not need a second set. If there's not really dramatic change, we go ahead and put the second half in. Is there a way that's ever done, or is you just go in and do it all at once?
Well, we always do before and after. So we have our before counts now. So we will always, after we do a traffic calming project like we did on Tustin, we'll do an after collection of speed data so we can see what the before and after was. So we would definitely plan to do that here and see what the true benefit is. The thing about putting in like speed cushions or traffic calming measures is you don't want to just sort of plop one in here and not have one for the rest of the street, or for it to be, another quarter of a mile or something before you come across another one, because they'll slow at that point, but they'll just get right back to the regular speed if there's not something consistently spaced as they go down the roadway. So it is something where you have to say, we're doing this project, we're committing to doing something, let's see what we get from doing it. And maybe that's the benefit to the rubberized, is you put it in and you've got that flexibility with the rubberized installation a little bit more than the asphalt. But I think you have to say, if I'm committing to doing something on, say, Highland, I'm going to put it at the spacing that it should be for it to be effective.
Well, I guess I would support that then. Thank you.
Ms. Brenner. Are you muted?
Good evening, sorry. Yes, I wanted to apologize for not being there in person. I did test positive for COVID just over 2 weeks ago, and although I'm doing very well now, I didn't want to put anyone in jeopardy by being there in person. So, but this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I did request that we form a Traffic Affairs Commission when I very first got on council. I've talked with staff over and over about that. We eventually got to the point where we thought we would change our planning commission to be planning and traffic affairs. That fell apart. I am going to be bringing this back at every opportunity, because traffic, as I have said over and over again, is the most pervasive problem in our community, widespread. in this case, I think we need to pay attention to the fact that these percentages were so high during this time of COVID, because I really think it translates to a much higher number if people were really able to get out there and talk to others as much as they normally would be doing. I'd like to see if we could do some sort of a phased approach where we start out and see how effective things are, and then see if that's really the direction we want to go, and see what works best. I know on 19th Street, I have practically stopped using it since they did the bulb outs at the corner. But my concern is I use the street that is parallel to that, one street over, because my daughter lives right there. And so we really have to be careful if we were to do pieces of this along the way, that we don't make it worse on other streets when we do things on certain streets. And I beg to differ on the speed bumps and being able to travel comfortably at 25 miles per hour. On Harborview Drive here in Corona Del Mar, you have to slow down to about 5, maybe 10 miles an hour to get over those. And then you're constantly accelerating to get to the next one. And I'm sure that it makes it louder for the people that live around there. Of course, nothing compares to safety. So safety is our primary concern. And I do also agree, after living in this community for almost 60 years, that we used to have a lot more traffic officers on all of our streets. I've said before that you used to never go over 25 miles an hour on the peninsula because you knew you were going to get a ticket. There were certain stop signs you knew you were always going to get see a police officer there, and you would make sure you stopped and looked at that police officer before you went across that intersection. So I think we've got some major work to do in this area, but we need to get started, because this is just inexcusable for us to have any more tragedies like this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tony.
Okay.
Great job on the report. Thank your staff.
Thank you.
So now's the time for public comments on agenda and non-agenda items. We'll start in the community room. This is for non-agenda items only. All right. Seeing no one going up. So do we have anybody on the phone? Great. Closed session, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor Avery. The City Council will adjourn to closed session to discuss item 4A, conference with labor negotiators regarding negotiations with the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk. The council appointees will recuse themselves from the meeting just because it impacts their personal finances. Thank you.
We have a speaker there.
A flash drive for me up there?
All right. Do you have a non-agenda item, sir?
It is, and I was told by the clerk, Jennifer Moss, or whatever her name is, there was supposed to be some pictures coming up on the screen. That would be it. We got missiles pointed at our oil offshore, especially the Gulf where I'm going to be heading, for you folks, because without oxygen we don't survive. If you will notice, there's also dope and guns, which, you can't get to them unless you're got a badge or a special something clipped to get you next to that ocean device right out there. Can we go to the next? Thank you. You'll notice green and orange are the only two colors with R for radioactive and nuclear, the containers. Only 3% out of 13 million are checked by our police customs coming in to this country. Anywhere those containers can go, they can go into your backyard. If you notice lately, there's a lot around. Not comfortable sight. Please go to the next, Mayor. Ocean to fresh water. If they radiate all our water, none of us live. That would be correct. Can we go to the next one? There it is. You got the desert scene, you pick one. You got crops or you got the desert. Ask Kingman, Arizona, Judge Lambert. Right, I'm bringing that boy up right now. And anyways, can we go to the next if there is another one? There is the military, filtering dope through our school systems. And you know what? The discrepancy child has that electronic eye connected to the police, which connects to the court for the innocent king's son. I'm speaking for King's son. Thank you so much, Newport Beach, for displaying exactly what is going on. Can we go to the next? There is none. So I'm going to start speaking about courts. Next will be courts. Every court superior has recorded discrepancy to prejudiced, which no court is allowed to do. Any judge in this nation knows no prejudice is allowed. So why is every male, and not the female, going to jail when there's an argument between a man and a woman? And why are the first three letters in sheriff she? I'm speaking prejudiced on the wall right now. Newport Beach, thank you.
We have a caller? Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
This is an agenda item, and my name's Lynch. I'm at 1424 Santiago Drive, and
Right.
we have lived here for 30 years.
So this is for non-agenda items only.
A resident of Newport for many years.
So,
But I
ma'am,
wanted
this is for
to
closed session and non-agenda items.
And the petition that was submitted and passed around our neighborhood. My husband and I support the safety for all senior citizens and children, and yet our objection was the wording in part. We don't support speed bumps or cushions. We do support striping or any type of median strip. I don't remember which councilwoman it was that mentioned the additional noise. We already have enough noise in our neighborhood, and the acceleration and the trucks and landscaping vehicles going over the speed bumps are a concern to us. So again, we support any safety measures, but not speed cushions or bumps.
Thank you. Please go ahead. Non-agenda item?
Yes,
Yeah, so this is for non-agenda items.
yes.
Okay,
Denise
please.
Oberman.
Hello, Denise.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and council members. Somebody's still speaking, apparently. Shall I go ahead anyway?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. I'm here to talk about the issue of amplified noise without a permit and events. I'm talking. Non-agenda item. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is a non-agenda item.
Denise, mute what you're listening to.
And I should be able to do that on the computer. Will I go ahead anyway?
Yes.
I'm trying to do it on the computer, but is that better?
Maybe.
I'll try, and if it's not audible, then I'll just hang up and forget it.
Okay, give it a go.
Okay, thank you so much. So I would like to bring up the issue of amplification and loud sound in non-permitted activities, and we've had a recurring event where there's an operator of a skating business, lessons, dancing, etc., that selected the Newport Elementary School playground without any permit to conduct regular events on Sunday afternoons, starting in the early afternoon, 1:30 or 2 o'clock, and continuing until after sunset. The noise is exceptionally loud. They've set up amplified speakers, and you can hear it for a number of blocks, and it's bass intensive. You know, they've got woofers, etc. We have tried to get assistance from the police department and recreation, and while in voice they have said that they want to help, they seem to have trouble coming to a position of enforcement. So the ordinance, according to the lieutenant that we've been working with, is very straightforward in its nature. So I'm wondering why it is so hard for our police and our other enforcement agents at the city to enforce. And other residents are wondering the same thing. We're being deprived of the peaceful enjoyment of our homes, in addition to other safety jeopardy. I've written notes to the council, and I appreciate the council's position as far as the public health issues. While we're not in agreement of it, we understand what it is. But we are asking that the city provide some philosophical direction to have the police and other staff enforce the ordinances so
Thank you, Denise.
residents can live safely and in the peaceful enjoyment of their homes.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Harp, try
All
it
right,
again.
and once again, the city council will be adjourning to closed session to meet with council members Will O'Neill and Diane Dixon regarding labor negotiations with the council appointees.